Morning came not with sound, but with a hush. The town of Bellwether, tucked between sea cliffs and slow-turning tides, woke beneath a quilt of fog. It was the sort of fog that didn't just blur the streets, but softened them, muffling bicycle wheels, crow calls, and the clink of teacups against porcelain. Even the gulls flew lower, as though reverent of the stillness. And in that silver breath of dawn, an old man stepped out from his cottage with a leather satchel at his side, and time folded gently into the creases of his coat. Mr. Ellery. He did not check the hour, for the clocks in his home had long since stopped ticking, not from fault, but from disinterest. His time was marked in slower ways, the warm weight of letters, the swing of his cane, the curve of the road beneath his worn shoes. Today, like most days, the fog seemed to remember him. It parted politely around his steps. There was a rhythm to his walk, not hurried, but deliberate, the kind of rhythm born from years of knowing which gates creaked, which fences leaned, which dogs barked but never bit. His satchel, sun-cracked and ink-stained, held more than envelopes. It carried the breath of lives written down, wedding invitations, utility bills, apologies, news of babies and estranged brothers. Mr. Ellery held them all with the same gentle respect, like a priest holding confession in his hands. But today something in his stride was slower still. There was a weight not in his bag, but in his chest. He had dreamed of her again last night. May, her voice just behind his ear, her laughter in the folds of the bedclothes when he awoke. It had been nearly 12 years since she passed, but grief, he'd learned, didn't vanish. It changed form, like fog. It became part of the route. The morning air was a tapestry of scents, damp stone, drying kelp, old wood, and paper, always paper. There was something about envelopes warmed by the body that carried a kind of tenderness. Mr. Ellery liked to imagine the hands that sealed them. Did they tremble? Did they hesitate? Did they linger? He held one now, a pale blue square sealed with wax, and drew it to his nose. Faint hints of rosemary and ink, the faintest echo of perfume, perhaps, or perhaps that too was memory teasing him. From the cliffs beyond, the sea murmured its endless story, the same story it told when he was a boy, the same one it would tell long after. Bellwether's homes had faces, he often thought. The tall green house on Eldritch Lane had eyebrows in the shape of shutters. The peach-colored one by the bakery looked like it was forever mid-giggle. He waved at no one, yet felt acknowledged. There was something comforting in the way the bricks held warmth, the way old windows watched him pass. These houses knew him, knew when he lingered a little longer at the gate of the Holloways, who had moved away, knew when he paused at a broken wind chime, and righted it without a word. Even in their stillness, these homes had memory. At the edge of Bellwether, past where the road narrowed into a whisper, stood a house forgotten by time, or at least by habit. It was draped in ivy that moved as if it breathed, curling inward during storms, stretching skyward in sunlight. Once it had been white, now it wore the green-gray of neglect and dreaming. Mr. Ellery hadn't delivered there in months, maybe years. He'd almost forgotten the name. But this morning, nestled among the usual parcels, was a small brown package with a name that tugged at something in his chest. Angelina Jolie. He paused before the overgrown gate. The fog had not reached here, or perhaps it had decided to stay away. He turned the package slowly in his hands. The ink was soft with age, the letters tilted like someone had written them while thinking of something else, or someone. Angelina Jolie, a name like a chord played on a memory. He tried to recall her. Had he ever met her, seen her collecting mail in bare feet, heard laughter spilling from a garden window? Nothing came, yet the name felt known. He pushed the gate. It groaned. The ivy rustled, not with wind, for there was none, but with awareness. She sat on the porch like she had always been there. A woman no older than 40, perhaps, but time clung strangely to her. Her pants were stained, dark purples, as if she had knelt among berries or spilt ink that refused to fade. She wore a soft grey sweater that might once have been blue. Her hands were folded, unmoving, Her eyes, not unkind, not frightened, stared just past him, like someone remembering something that hadn't happened yet. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The fog didn't reach the porch, yet the air around her seemed to hum with silence. The stains on her pants were neither fresh nor old. They looked settled, as if they had grown there slowly, one petal at a time. He thought of May, pressing violets into her journals, said it made time stay still. Perhaps this woman had pressed time into her clothing. Unknowingly, the package in his hands suddenly felt heavier. "Miss Julie?" he asked softly. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, but something in her posture shifted, like a breath drawn inward, very deep. He placed the package at her feet. She looked down, and for the first time, her eyes seemed to find the present. For a moment the fog paused its drift. Even the sea seemed to wait. The woman leaned forward, reaching for the parcel, not with surprise, but with ritual. Her fingers brushed the twine, her lips parted, and then a whisper, not loud, not clear, but full of something. Recognition, relief. Mr. Ellery did not ask what it was. Some mornings did not offer answers, only questions wrapped in ivy and quiet names. He tipped his hat. The woman smiled, barely, but it was enough. As he turned to leave, the fog resumed its song, and the ivy rustled once more, as if a page had been turned in some long-forgotten book. And Bellwether, still quiet beneath its soft sky, held the moment like breath. The morning that felt out of time had passed through him, and left a note behind. There was a time, years ago now, when music floated from the ivy-wrapped house, like light through stained glass. Mr. Ellery remembers it, faint but steady, as he walks the winding edge of Bellwether's last lane. The house belonged to her, back when people still danced at dusk, and laughter spilled like water from the hedges. Lanterns had hung from the apricot tree, not electric, but glass ones, glowing from within, like captive fireflies. And Angelina Jolie, her name spoken like a note held on the tongue, was always in motion. She painted with pigments, made from berries and bark, brewed colors in ceramic bowls, her fingers always dusted with some living shade of the earth. He remembers a party once, long ago, where she wore a dress the color of the sea, and sang with her hands in the air, as if catching stars. Back then, she smiled with her whole face. Back then, the house was awake. Now, it looks like a place waiting for breath. Ivy crawls along the porch railings, not wild but purposeful, like the house was covering itself slowly. Dust sits like velvet across the windows. The curtains haven't moved in seasons, and yet, it doesn't feel abandoned. It feels paused, as if someone inside had taken one slow step backward from time, and the house, in loyalty or sorrow, followed. Mr. Ellery climbs the creaking stairs, the soft slap of his soles whispering across the wooden boards. The fog has receded from the lane, but here the air still feels thick, full of breath that hasn't yet been exhaled. Through the front window, slightly cracked at the corner, he peers into what might be a museum of stillness. Dried petals cling to picture frames, pansies, violets, faded bits of rose, their colors long since whispered away by the sun. Some are pressed beneath glass, others lie like quiet offerings in bowls of dust. There are sketches taped to the walls, curling like leaves, each one drawn with soft graphite lines. Glimpses of hands, candlelight, unfamiliar faces, and once unmistakably, her own reflection. Everything inside is soft, unmoved, like a memory carefully preserved and never disturbed. She sits exactly where he left her, on the porch, still and gentle, her clothes stained by forgotten work, indigo down the thighs, sienna near the cuffs. Her sweater clings to her shoulders as if held in place by habit alone. Her gaze doesn't shift when he clears his throat. Angelina Jolie. The name feels different now, not just faded, but folded inwards, like a letter never sent. She had vanished from town life without any real announcement. Some said grief took her, others that her heart had broken so quietly, no one heard it until she was already gone. But here she was, sitting, breathing, Eyes like locked doors in a house with all the lights on. The wind, curling in from the garden path, carries a scent that makes Ellery stop. Lavender, that's expected. She always loved it, and likely still grew it by instinct alone. But beneath it, something metallic, like copper, or old pennies, like rainwater left too long in a silver bowl. The mixture unsettles, not for danger, but for the way it stirs some part of him that resists naming, the part that knows how silence can hold shape. He glances again at her hands. They rest palm down on her lap, stilled by more than choice. "Good morning, Miss Julie," he says, low. His voice is careful, shaped with warmth, not the brightness used for neighbors with chatter, but the tone reserved for twilight rooms and waiting bedsides. She doesn't move, doesn't blink, but her breath rises. He wonders if she hears him from some place far behind her eyes, some garden memory, or echo chamber of yesteryears where music still plays. The silence is thick but not unkind. It is simply far. He shifts his weight. The wood groans softly beneath his heel. It's not a groan of age, not quite, more a sound of recognition, as if the house remembered his step, as if the porch, once filled with dancing shoes and paint-streaked sandals, felt the echo of a gentler time. He places one hand on the doorframe. Just a touch, just enough to feel the vibration of stillness inside. The door, when nudged, yields a few inches. He doesn't step in, not yet, but he looks. There's a candle burning in a dish of water on the side table, not new but steady. Its flame curves slightly like it's listening. Beside it, a painting, half finished. A woman walking into mist. No face, just the outline, and a long red scarf trailing behind. The scent inside is thicker, lavender and that same metallic thread. Not unpleasant, just strange. Letters sit on a table in neat stacks. Some still sealed, others with lines half written, paused mid-sentence. The ink looks brittle. Time here hasn't stopped. It's simply looping. He notices the stains again, on her clothes, beneath her nails, on the back of her wrist. They're not haphazard. They're not messy. They're remnants of making, of touching things that held color and meaning, and giving them new life. Even in stillness, her hands remember how to create. It's not madness, he thinks. It's memory, curled around her like a shawl. He takes a step back. He doesn't call the police. He doesn't panic. Instead, he pulls a small flip phone from his coat and presses the third speed dial. It rings twice. Ellery, comes the warm, sleepy voice of his niece, Mariam, a care aide who reads poetry to patients who no longer speak. "There's a woman," he says gently. "You might know her name. Angelina Jolie. She's here, but she's not. I think she's lost." A pause. "Lost, not in place," he murmurs. "In time." And as he stands there watching fog kiss the windows and ivy lean toward the light, he doesn't feel afraid. He feels as though he has just found someone in the softest part of forgetting. And maybe, just maybe, she can be remembered back. It began with bread, still warm, wrapped in a linen napkin, stitched with blue thread. No note, no knock, just presence. Mr. Ellery placed it on the doorstep of the ivy-covered house, paused for a heartbeat, and left. And the next day, the cloth was folded neatly and left on the railing. The day after that, a teacup appeared beside it. No words were exchanged, not then, but something had shifted in the quiet. A rhythm began between them, tender as breath. Angelina did not speak, not in the way most people did, but her house whispered of who she had been. On a table near the window, silk scarves rested like forgotten rainbows, faded, yes, but still flushed with color, rose, woad, elderberry, turmeric. A pair of shears lay beside a bowl of dried marigold heads. Her pants bore blotches of violet and saffron, as though her hands had once been stained with joy. Mr. Ellery sometimes paused at the doorway, watching her thumb a petal between her fingers, as though remembering how it once felt in bloom. She had been an artist, not of canvases or oils, but of living things, of colors steeped from memory. The house held its hush like an old cathedral, not out of fear, but reverence. When Ellery stepped inside now, gently invited, He noticed how the hallway seemed to sigh, how the stairs creaked softly, like lullabies from a long-closed music box. Rainlight slid down the windows, not in rivulets, but in streaks, slow as tears not quite ready to fall. He never turned on lights. The glow of dusk through thin curtains was enough. There was no urgency here, only patience, and time gently folding in on itself. He found it on the side table, beneath a hand-painted lamp, folded once, crisp. On the envelope the name Clara, written in careful script, a stamp, unused, rested beside it, like a breath never drawn. He didn't ask, he only noticed. Sometimes silence offers more than questions ever could. It happened one afternoon, when a soft drizzle tickled the porch roof. From somewhere deeper in the house, a sound began to hum, a music box. He followed it gently, was open on a shelf. Its tune was delicate, imperfect, as though played by a hand made of memory. It wasn't a song he recognized, but something in it caught in the throat, like a laugh that turned into a sigh. Angelina didn't react. Her fingers simply traced the rim of a mug, but he saw her eyes flick toward the ceiling, as if remembering the song before the box, remembered how to play it. He brought tea on Thursdays, loose leaves not bags, always steeped just so. He didn't speak unless she did. Sometimes he would read aloud, soft old things, Frost, Neruda, Hafiz, and when she stared at the steam rising from her cup, he let the silence stretch. There was something sacred in the hush, like listening to wind move through wildflowers. In those still moments, something in her shoulders began to ease. Not much, just enough. Behind a curtain, tucked between old books and a cracked mirror, he found a notebook. The pages were filled in fits and fragments, but one line stood alone, pressed in ink still sharp. The world doesn't knock anymore. Maybe it's waiting for me to knock back. He read it twice, then once more, and left it where he found it. Unmoved, unmoved, unspoken. Some words he knew, only bloom when read in silence. One afternoon, when crows circled high, and the jasmine was heavy with scent, he brought something from his coat pocket. A letter, her letter, her letter. The same envelope, now stamped and returned, still sealed after all these years. He placed it in her hands, gently. She did not open it, but her fingers trembled, as if the paper pulsed with heartbeat. She stared for a long time, then said, voice low and soft, she never wrote back. 9. The tear that fell without sound. It wasn't a weeping, it was just one tear, a slow one, from the left eye, as if released from behind a window that had been fogged too long. Her lips parted, but no sob came, only the rise and fall of breath, like a bird trying its wings after years of stillness. Ellery didn't reach for her. He didn't need to. He simply sat, one foot beneath the other, hands folded in his lap, heart wide open. 10. When grief sits without needing to be fixed. Sometimes, he said at last, people don't know how. He meant to finish the thought, but it hung there full and enough. She didn't speak again, but she nodded, not to him, perhaps, but to the thought, to the truth of it. Not everything broken needs mending. Some things need only to be seen. 11. Rooms that learn to breathe again. That evening, no music played, no words were read, but the candle on the table burned steady, and another, long untouched, was lit beside it. She hadn't written a new letter, but she placed the old one on the mantel, not hidden anymore. Ellery watched her brush her fingers across a strip of silk, just once, a touch like memory. Outside, the fog lifted slightly from the hedge, and in the stillness, the house, once breathless, seemed to sigh, a sound not of grief, but of being gently remembered. And somewhere, perhaps, the world knocked, just once, and waited. The sky came down in a hush. No thunder, no warning, just a soft rain, barely a whisper, threading its way through the ivy outside Angelina's porch. It was the kind of rain that didn't rush you indoors, but invited you to pause, the kind that tapped gently on the wooden railing, and dripped from the eaves like lullabies falling one by one. Angelina sat wrapped in an old wool blanket, a deep green one with stitched corners unraveling like softened memories. Ellery sat beside her, quiet as ever, his hands cupped around a mug of tea. The garden below, wild and unkempt, bowed its head in thanks. Neither of them spoke, not yet. Steam curled from their teacups, rising like spirits into the morning air. The silence was not empty. It was full of everything that had gone unsaid, and everything that didn't need to be said at all. Ellery's coat smelled faintly of spice and rain. Angelina's fingers tapped once against the ceramic rim of her cup, then settled. There was no rush. Today moved slowly, the way healing does, steady, reluctant, but real. Then, like light slipping under a door, her voice arrived, soft, uneven. "Clara," she said, as if testing the name against the rain. Ellery didn't flinch. He only looked out at the garden, waiting. She was older, Angelina said, barely, but she acted like a mother bird, always folding things, notes, scarves, my hands, a pause, a breath. The porch creaked. When she got sick, I started dyeing everything, like if I could just make the world more beautiful, it wouldn't fall apart. Her hands gripped the mug tighter, and then one day, she was just gone, and I stopped making. The wind carried the last word off the porch, into the leaves. Later, she took him inside, to a room she hadn't opened in years. The door groaned, not from neglect, but from holding in too much. Inside, color waited, not bright, not loud, but deep. Stained silks folded in baskets, paintings leaning against the walls, letters curled with time, unopened and unsent. The air was thick with lavender and old grief. A window left cracked had let ivy creep in, twining its way across the sill like a green breath. Angelina stood in the doorway, not entering, just watching as the past welcomed the present. Ellery knelt beside a bundle of violet-stained fabric and lifted a corner between his fingers. The color had bled in uneven strokes, splotched like tears on paper. "These aren't stains," he murmured, tracing the petal-shaped blotches. "They're echoes." She looked at him, really looked. "You kept her here," he said, "in all of this." Angelina didn't answer, but something in her chest eased, like a window unlatching. They began to clean, slowly, gently, not with buckets or bleach, but with care. They dusted the shelves with cloths soft as old lullabies, unfolded the silks, and shook them loose, let sunlight into corners that hadn't seen day in years. The dust didn't vanish. It danced. Caught in light, it rose and shimmered, not as a sign of decay, but of presence. This house wasn't forgotten. It had just been waiting. In the afternoon, the rain passed. The world outside smelled like softened earth, and something newly forgiven. Angelina brought out baskets. Ellery brought scissors. Together they clipped blossoms from the garden, marigold, rose, lavender, indigo. They crushed the petals, boiled water in old copper pots, dipped white silks in bowls of new color. Her fingers remembered the way to twist, to fold, to stir. And when she looked at her hands, stained with plum and gold, she didn't frown. She smiled, just a little, as if the colors had begun speaking to her again. In the room of silks and echoes, there sat one canvas still propped on its easel, unfinished. It showed a field, wildflowers sketched, not yet bloomed. The sky above it was only half born, a twilight waiting for its stars. Angelina stood before it a long while. Then she sat. She picked up the brush, and with steady hands dipped it into the violet she'd made that morning. Stroke by stroke, the sky unfurled. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. When the final stroke was placed, a single streak of honeyed gold above the horizon, she leaned forward and with a careful hand signed her name in the corner. "To Clara, with every color you gave me." No sound but the soft brushing of bristles. No words but the ones painted in light. The next day they walked down the overgrown path to town, arm in arm. Her steps were unsure at first, like a melody remembered after too long. But the ivy that once clung seemed to part gently now, as if giving its blessing. Neighbors peeked from windows. A wind chime sang. The world did not shout. It welcomed. Near the market square, a small boy with freckles and two big boots stopped her. He pointed at her hands, still faintly streaked with pigment. "Are you the lady who paints the sky?" he asked, eyes wide. Angelina blinked, surprised then shy. She looked down at her palms, then at the sky above, streaked that morning with soft oranges and lilac. She laughed, a quiet round sound that filled the air like a bird taking off. "I used to be," she said, voice touched with wonder. "Maybe I could again." The boy grinned. Ellery beside her said nothing, but he held her hand a little tighter, and she didn't let go. Behind them the path home shimmered with fallen petals and footprints, and ahead, the light shone through the ivy, unafraid. It began with one letter, then another, not the kind with news or errands, but moments, tiny brushstrokes of sky, soft watercolor moons, pressed petals folded inside like secrets. Angelina wrote slowly, in her looping hand, sometimes only a line of poetry, sometimes a dried violet, its scent faint but persistent. She addressed them not always by name, but by feeling. To the woman who still waters her rosemary at dusk, to the man with the red scarf and the quiet sadness. And when the post office opened the next morning, Ellery found them waiting. No return address, just little envelopes, tied with petals. The house no longer hid. Curtains were drawn back, and light, soft as breath, streamed in through the ivy-filtered panes. Angelina didn't cut the vines away completely. She trimmed just enough to let the sun slip through, dappling the floorboards, catching in her teacup, warming her wrists as she painted. The rooms no longer echoed. They sang, gently, with the hum of open windows and the creak of the porch swing. Dust didn't settle the way it used to. It danced. One morning, she found a small rock on her gatepost, painted yellow, with a smiling sun and 3 little hearts. No signature, just a gift. By week's end there were more. A blue stone with stars, a tiny rainbow, a shell glued to a smooth pebble with sea glass eyes. Children she did not know by name sometimes peeked over the fence, giggling, darting away. She didn't chase them. She only added a small sign to the gate, hand-lettered in lavender ink. "You may leave the sky here. I'll take good care of it." The letter arrived without fanfare. A small gallery on the far end of town, tucked between a bakery and a shop that sold old maps, had seen one of her cards, passed along, held in someone's wallet. The gallery didn't ask for a showcase, only a corner, a window, a little space for her colors to rest, where passers-by might pause. Angelina touched the letter once to her lips, then folded it into a drawer, not to forget, but to keep it warm. She began selecting pieces, not perfect ones, honest ones. Ellery came still, as he always did. But now, without the satchel, without the schedule, no longer a mailman, but a friend. He brought tea in mismatched mugs, and stories from the road, about a cat that had taken up residence in the post office rafters, about an old woman who sent herself postcards to see how long they'd take to arrive. Some mornings they spoke, other mornings they didn't. They sat side by side on the porch, watching the ivy ripple like old green laughter. It came on a morning when the sky was half silvered with cloud, a folded sheet of paper, no stamp, no envelope, just placed gently on the small wooden table outside Ellery's door. He knew the handwriting at once. To the one who saw the stains and stayed to see the story, "Thank you for not calling for rescue, but arriving instead." He read it twice, then again, folded it carefully, pressed it to his heart, and smiled. A few days later, it arrived, not in a package, just draped gently on the gate. A scarf, soft as early evening, dyed in violets and deep ocean blue. The colors blended like twilight and seafoam, as if sorrow had been steeped and steeped again, until it became something tender. He lifted it like one lifts an old song, held it in his hands, tied it around his neck. Now when Ellery walked the winding lanes of the village, he wore the scarf. People noticed, not the scarf itself, but something in the way he wore it, as if he wasn't delivering letters anymore, but delivering mornings. He waved to children. He paused to watch birds take flight. He hummed sometimes, quietly, as though a song was unfolding from somewhere just behind the horizon. The scarf trailed in the wind behind him like a painted ribbon of memory. Some said it smelled faintly of lavender, others, of rain. But Ellery knew, It smelled like a house where ivy had made room for light, like a porch where two cups once steamed side by side, like the echo of a life colored in again. Some houses do not creak for attention, they hum, not in words, but in the breath between them, the way a chair holds the shape of someone long gone, or a teacup gathers warmth long after being set down. The house where Angelina lives no longer hushes the world away, it listens. The ivy still clings, but not to hide. Now it shades sun into mosaics on the floor. The walls do not sigh with sorrow, they exhale, gently, like sleep beginning to dream. Ellery, older now, walks past without a satchel, only a scarf, indigo and soft, loose around his neck. His footsteps know the way, so does the wind. The stains on the porch steps are still there, so is the faded paint on the railing, the cracked tile by the threshold, the stubborn vine that won't quite behave. But they are not marks of neglect, they are what remains after something is endured, the slow and patient fingerprint of time, not as a destroyer, but as a witness. The quiet corners of the house do not ache now, they remember. The garden has grown wild, and wonderfully so. Lavender spills like laughter, peonies lean into the sun, poppies nod as if half listening to a song carried on wind. Ellery pauses at the gate, a butterfly brushes his shoulder, the scent of rosemary and wet soil clings to the air like a promise. The garden does not greet him with words, only color, rising softly from the earth like memory choosing to bloom again. From inside the house, a bell chimes, not urgent, just a soft reminder that time is still moving, not to rush, but to welcome the next moment. Laughter follows, warm, surprised, shared. Angelina is not alone. A visitor, someone new, or someone returned, has made her laugh from somewhere deep. The kind of laughter that only comes when the hurt no longer has the last word. Behind the window, tinged with lavender glass, silhouettes move like candlelight. The town itself breathes in twilight. Windows begin to glow, one by one, like stars testing their shine before night fully arrives. Curtains sway, dinners are plated, someone hums near a sink, another reads in a chair worn soft at the edges. There are no spotlights here, only quiet constellations, small homes becoming galaxies of their own. Each window holds a story, some written, some painted, some simply lived. There are no envelopes in Ellery's hands now, but the world has found other ways to speak. A glance held a moment longer than needed, a scarf passed on, a garden that knows the color of grief, and still chooses to grow. And in that place where color returned to a woman's fingers, the world began writing letters again, not on paper, but in light. Letters of return, of recognition, of rest. Letters you read only when you slow down enough to see them, in the glint of sun on glass, or the hush that follows healing. Some stories don't end, they soften and stay.